set of notes to talk from here.
If you want to start recording, let's go. Come on. Okay, folks, this is a Tom Dixon profile build seminar. It's going to be live stream, and then when I get back to St. Louis, I'm shooting it in a 3-cam situation. It'll be put together as a movie, but enjoy the live stream. So go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Sparky. What I want to do this evening is try to go over some of the things I do building profiles. And something that runs through everything that I do is simple, cheap, fast, sturdy, least complicated thing that works possible, and can get airplanes in the air fast. Now, since the first of the year, I've been building some airplanes ready to fly for people, which means I got to do it fast. I got to do it in a way that's cheap enough, sturdy enough, and so forth. So these are some of the things that I do that help make the airplanes last and make it fast to build, because there's no point in taking forever to build a profile. On the other hand, you don't want to put together profile airplanes that look like junk that you're not reasonably proud of. Now, there are a lot of ARF profiles out there, no question about it. I think you're better off building from scratch or buying a wing and building from plans and that sort of thing. You get the airplane you want instead of compromising with something that was put together by Chinese housewives or whatever. So a couple things. This is a stunt machine, a profile stunt machine, Gene Schaefer stunt machine from early 70s. It was redone, the plans were redone by me from warranty arts corrections that were made from Gene Schaefer's original airplane. It was out in Tucson with Lou Wool gas. So I had an extra wing laying around. I threw the airplane together to fly up here. So I incorporated some of these things I'm going to talk about in it. So start with fuselage. One of the things that I always do, and if you're a scratch builder or a kid builder from way back, most kits you would get, I don't know if you've got this on the camera, Barky. You look at some of them, the motor mounts come back in the end right here. Mm-hmm. All of mine, the kits that I sell, airplanes that I build, one motor mount ends about here, other one ends about here. Not all the way down here, but they're staggered. So they don't have a stress point where when that front end flexes, it's not all in one place. It spreads out the strain. So you're not liable to get the nose bouncing back and forth. The other thing is the inboard cheek. This is 3/8 balsa that's hollowed out for the gear mount at the bottom. And it's not on there for looks. It's on there to further stiffen that joint at the front end of the fuselage, again, to keep it from waving back and forth. And it's important to have that tied in. I've seen some airplanes out here, some electric airplanes, of course, not really an issue, but they'll have the cheek on the inboard side, and yet there's a gap between it, or it's just like it was just thrown together without any real attention to structural integrity to the airplane. The fuselage, 1/2-inch balsa sheet, and it's fiberglass with 0.5 ounce fiberglass, which is on your list here somewhere. I get it from a place called CST Composites, I think it is, out in California. You get a whole roll for like $20. It's ridiculously cheap. I use glass instead of carbon fiber to stiffen the fuselage because it's cheap, because it's just as stiff as carbon, and it's easy to work with. When I fiberglass the fuselage, I do it before with wing and tail in, of course. Lay the fuselage down, lay the glass on it, mix some 5-minute epoxy, thin it with denatured alcohol, paint it through the glass, go around the edges to make them a little bit harder, let it set for 20 or 30 minutes, trim the glass off with 220 paper, flip it over, do the other side, let it set for 20 or 30 minutes, trim it off, put another thick coat of epoxy, 500 epoxy with the alcohol on it, let it set 24 hours, come back, sand it with 80 grit to break the glaze on the epoxy. 80 grit, 220 grit dry. You can put some primer on it if you want to then. I wait till I put the airplane together, and then it's ready for paint. It's stiff, it's strong, it's field proof, and it's fast. And doing operations like that, I usually do them before I go to bed at night, so the next day they're ready to do whatever the next step is. The wings, foam wing, It's covered, it's sheeted with 16th balsa. It's silk span with dope as a base on the wing itself. The rest of the tail surfaces and everything are covered with exam table paper that you can get from Amazon. It's called exam table paper crepe. You want the crepe stuff, CREPE. There are other exam table papers, but they're slick and they won't take dope. The exam paper is not as porous as silk span, but the flip side of that is it fills faster than silk span. It's not as good around compound curves and stuff, which is why I use silk span on the wings, get around the tips and so forth and so on. Put it on exactly like however you put silk span on, you can use the exam table paper exactly the same way. It's cheap. I've got a box like this, about so long. It's got, supposed to have 30 rolls in it, and I got it for like $25. That's enough. I'm giving them away all the time. It's enough for a lifetime to build an airplane.
One roll will do 4 airplanes.
At least. I mentioned the dope base, nitrate dope, silk span, and then rattle can primer that comes from Harbor Freight. It's called sandable primer. It's really the exact same thing as the old, Napa primer that we've used for years. Rattle it, spray it on there. I let it dry overnight. I just ladle it on the airplane, let it dry overnight. Come back, dry sand it lightly with 220. 320 until you begin to see the base come through the other side. And then wet sand it with 400. And then I put the airplane together. I'll spray a couple of coats of nitrate on it just to kind of lock everything down. Spray the color. Stripe it. This is striping tape from SIG or whoever sells it. Then the clear coat, you were asking about the clear coat earlier. This is from Southern Polyurethane. All the hot rod people call it SPI. If you're in the automotive industry, everybody knows what SPI is. It comes out of Blairsville, Georgia. I like using it because it's a local product. I also like using it because it's a good deal cheaper than a lot of the big names. And a lot of the hot rod custom car finishers use it for the same reason. The clear has 4 different activators. Very fast, slow, and very slow. And the way I put it on this airplane, I mix up probably, I don't think how much you use, because it's probably 1 ounce of activator, 1 ounce of the clear polyurethane, 1 ounce of butyrate thinner. And it's the clear is supposed to be mixed 1-to-1. I mix it with thinner just to thin it out some more, make it easier to spray it with a Harbor Freight touch-up gun. I'm not trying to go for a buffed out fancy finish. This is one thin coat sprayed with a touch-up gun as it came out of the gun. On top of and it's sprayed on top of the trim, the stripes and so forth. What I'm trying to do is make it shiny a little bit, make it fuel proof. But the great advantage is I can paint dope when it's raining. It can blush all over the place. Come back with the polyurethane the next day, it takes the blush right out of it and leaves it looking like that. Time sake. You know, this idea of waiting forever until a good day when you can paint is ridiculous. If you use the polyurethane clear coat, then that's another reason having butyrate thinner in it. The moisture comes right out of it. Of course, the polyurethane cures chemically, and I use the slow catalyst most of the time, and it's tacky in 15, 20 minutes, but you really don't want to handle it, pick the airplane up, move it around for 5 or 6 hours. If you're going to be buffing the paint out, if you put enough on the buff it, you can buff it out the next day, stand and cut and buff and polish it up the way you want. But that's sort of about the way the airplane is constructed and the way it looks. What I kind of wanted to emphasize tonight was some other quickie things I've come up with. A lot of people in the control systems have been doing what I've been doing, which is taking the horns and mounting them on the RC horns and mounting them on a piece of plywood, because these horns, of course, will rip out of balsa. I found that out the hard way, like everything else I know. A lot of the old kids show you the horn mounted on top, screws go through, the backing plates on the back, for control line airplane, it'll rip right through, especially the lighter the balsa you have. So for 30, 40 years, I mounted them on a piece of plywood, just hollow out a section underneath on the flap or the elevator and just glue it on top. Then when you want to make sure the holes in the horn are lined up with the hinge line, just like any other horns you could do. You could also inset them into the surface, which makes it look kind of neat, you know, and just be sure the holes you're using correspond to whatever control ratios you want. If you want 1 inch drive from your bell crank to the horn, measure up 1 inch or sink it as far as you want. But otherwise, if you're building everything on top, you're going further and further away from the actual center. Because on a 1/4 inch flap, you're already an 1/8 inch away from the center. So you don't want the horn, I use a 1 inch, so that leaves you 7/8 to work with to come out to a 1 inch drive, and then it's 1 to 1. Now, something I came up with later, I'm sure it can't be an original idea, was instead of using the stupid little screws that come with the horns, these are servo mounting screws that they sell. I don't know what they call it. These are from Micro Fasteners. It just calls them, servo screw set, number 2 by 9/16. And of course, these are trimmed off on the back. This hasn't been trimmed yet. I'll pass that around you. The advantage there for me is I put the airplane together, and I'll talk about that in a second, get everything lined up and take the control system off the airplane. Then I can sand paint, do the fillets, screw it back on there. If I want to paint it with the airplane, I put it back together and paint it. But it's hard to work with it, you know, finishing it if you've got it built into the airplane. But the servo screws make it a hell of a lot. It's just a 256 socket driver. And zip, 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 and they're off. Instead of trying to do those tiny little stupid screws where the screwdriver always slips out and sticks in something. You know?
Don't those servo screws have like a built-in washer on the head too?
You'll see. It's got the socket, but it's got like a little flap on the bottom of it. You can also use, I've also used round head button head screws they use the same wrench as a wheel collar. They're pretty and they're nice. This is actually easier because you're just like ham-fisted. You can take it apart, put it together. The push rod, of course, is a one-piece 3/32 wire with a carbon fiber sleeve on it that I just bend one end, put the sleeve over, bend the other end, run some thin CA down, hit it with kicker. You can bend it, but it takes some real effort. And I see these airplanes with arrow shafts, and ball joints and all this stuff on there. This is simple, it's fairly cheap. The carbon fiber tubes are fairly cheap. I think it's 5/32 OD, 100 thousandths ID, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, I hold them on with wheel collars. And if you're trimming an airplane, new airplane, you want to move stuff around, you can take the collars off easy. Normally, I just put the wheel collars on permanently and put 5-minute epoxy on the set screw and then into the wire, just as an extra safety precaution. Again, putting airplanes together, I see all these ball joints, and also in Brodak kits. The way I put the airplanes together, I'll tape the flaps neutral with masking tape on both sides, tape the elevator to stabilize it neutral on both sides, bend the push rod to the length that I want, whatever the tail moment's supposed to be, hook up the push rod to the elevator, hook it up to the flap horn. When you drop the stabilizer down, everything's aligned and the moment's exactly right. You don't have to adjust anything. It's just a matter of getting it this way, and then glue it solid, take the tape off. You got the controls lined up. Instead of trying to build the airplane and then adjust the control system to fit. Or like Brodak kits say, you put the tail on and then you solder the push rod together in the middle. Really? You got to solder 2 pieces of wire with a brass sleeve and right where the stress is. No, but the nice thing about these deals is that when you paint them, it virtually disappears. And also you can take these and make the fuselage hollow, and if you want, put the controls on the inside, which you can't really do with a 1/4 inch 5/16 arrow shaft. And also, you don't need any fairlead on the side of the airplane because it's so stiff. Let's see, what else have I got here?
What normally size bell crank do you use?
If I use I use the 4-inch Brodeck bell crank, and I always drive from the innermost hole. That way, on a profile, you can change the horn lengths to adjust the sensitivity of the controls. On all my airplanes, standard airplanes, your 1-inch horn from the inside hole in the bell crank, 4-inch bell crank. You used to make the things. No wonder you're asking. But inside an innermost hole, it gives real slow controls. You can see how much the lead outs move to only about 25, 30 degrees over movement. And normally that works for me on most airplanes with a 4-inch line space, and the old hot rod line space. There are other ratios, there are other horns. What I tell people is the same thing I learned from Dave Hemstrom many years ago, from one of his articles. Get a control system, the ratios you're used to, don't keep reinventing the wheel. Fly the same control setup in every airplane you've got, Then you adjust the airplane to fit you and what you're used to doing with the handle and the sensitivity. Because everybody's field is different. There's no one right way to do it. There are a lot of ways to do it wrong. But if you find something that works, then just keep duplicating it and adjusting the airplanes to match. This one I did with solid lead outs, which I had not done in probably 50 years. And the simple and sole reason it has solid lead outs is they're cheap. 2 pieces of 1/32 wire is a whole lot cheaper than the brass plated Sullivan cable that's $8 or $9 for like 6 feet of it now. Ridiculous. And the solid lead outs seem to work just fine as long as you don't bang into a door or something. Now this airplane does not have adjustable lead outs. Pretty much the go pretty standard location, so that's what I work with. An Nobler, you don't need to make adjustable lead outs because it's not a Nobler, but it's sort of the same. And it's one less thing, one less thing you have to fool with on the inboard wing. A little bit less weight, a little bit less cost. And the value of adjustable lead outs for most people is fairly minimal. If you built one airplane and it flies right, keep building them in the same place. There's no point in making it more complicated than it needs to be. See, people lose airplanes because the screw comes out of the adjuster and it slides forward, it slides back, and whatever. Let me talk about tanks for a while. I find that on profiles, the plastic tanks work best. Now, the only drawback they have that I don't particularly like is you can't loop the airplane at the end of the flight to shut off the motor. Of course, if you're flying electric, none of this matters. But the other thing, I'm probably late to the party on discovering this, that if you take the little back plate on the tank thing and tap it 440, it's a whole lot easier to put the damn thing together and take it apart. I just figured this out about a month ago. But this is the vent system I use. The long one is your feed. You got that on camera anywhere? You got it somewhere? Standard Uniflow setup, 2 floppy tubes. The tubing is important. The tubing that comes in these tanks is too stiff. If you've got a 16-ounce tank on an RC airplane, that's fine. But even this thin stuff you see it's not hyper floppy. This is SIG's medium-sized tubing, which seems to be the same as the Sullivan tubing you used to be able to get in rolls. It was a lot more flexible than what they put in these things these days, but take a look at that. But with the 440 screw in the front end, it works a whole lot better. Oh, did I pass? Oh, you looked at, these are the servo screws, by the way. It's number STW0208 or 9. I guess that's a 9.
Let me interject something.
Yeah.
If you don't want to go through tapping the screw, Dubro sells a wood screw with a 440 ball drive on it.
Well, that works too. That would work too, sure.
And on the pickup tubes, I personally solder the Uniflow to the other one clump.
One more step, one more time. It works, obviously. Works. I'm about quick, dirty, does it work, out the door.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it is okay then to have the Uniflow and the fuel pickup free?
yeah.
Okay.
That's the way I've always done it. I mean, Sparky likes them together. Obviously, they're gonna follow each other if they're soldered together, but I've never seen a problem with them like this.
I've also heard, because I've never done it, that if you take that plastic tube that comes in that Uniflow thing and run it all the way to the back, that works.
I don't know the same thing. I haven't tried it either.
I just told by the guy.
All the guys that know better than we do, probably.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. But yours has worked for you for how many years? And mine's worked for a zillion years.
Yeah, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I see with lots of people in kits, they show a tail wheel. Now, the wire comes up, goes up in the fuselage like this, got the wheel in the end, and that's the way it's shown on the plan. This is what I do. I don't know if you got that on camera somewhere.
See the red dot? That's where you point it.
There you go. The reason for that is if you do this and it ever comes slightly loose, it'll pivot away from the fuselage, even if you got a slot here. You're sticking a hard balsa, a piece of music wire into hard wire into soft balsa, relatively speaking. So what I do with this, I make this hole usually with just an awl or sometimes 440 wrench if it's laying around, just poke a hole in it. Then I make a knife slot here, stick it all together, then put a piece of 16 balsa wedged in here, then dribble thin CA in slots. Let it soak and go off by itself. Then trim this off, put fiberglass on top of it, and it ain't coming off of it. And in the kits that I stick enough fiberglass in there. I want the glass tape that you join the wings with, so you can wrap it around the tail wheel on the bottom. So that's there, and you can use the epoxy putty stuff that comes from Aircraft Spruce, or the Brodex sells it under another name. I get it from Aircraft Spruce, and just you can sort of feather it in if you want to, cover it up so it's not so ugly.
Superfill for you guys watching the video.
Superfill, right. Good stuff. Better than epoxylite. Does not look like baby poop, unlike epoxylite used to look. Let's see what else we need here. You could also the tanks. They have Sullivan has what they call a brass centered. They call it a fuel filter. That can be used as a clunk weight. Mm-hmm. Especially if you don't have a lot of space that you can put a filter. In fact, this one doesn't have a filter because it's all jammed together, and I couldn't get a filter in there. I've been running it without a filter so far. And I just never took the tank apart to put one of those things on it instead to be the filter inside the tank. That works okay. They've been known to come apart over a long period of time. The fuel just breaks them down, but you'd probably tear up the airplane before that happens. I like the superfill. It makes everything pretty that you cover up with it. And it does add a lot of strength. I think it adds a lot of strength right here, where I go back after putting you can put the wire through the fuselage and then put the flaps on, or put one flap on and put the wire through and put the other flap on. Lately what I do, I just make a slot, slide it, wing it all, flaps it all the way through, fill the slot back up, put the balsa fillets in there, and then cover it with the superfill. And since it's epoxy, it's going to help some stiffen the back end of the fuselage. Another trick I've had to use when I got here the other day, it'd been sitting in the car tilted. The stab was like 20 degrees off to one side. There's a heat gun up there in that cabinet. Just came in here with a heat gun and just twisted it straight. Twisted the other way, held it for a while, relaxed, a little more, held it for a while. It's pretty damn straight now, compared to where it was at least. And I do that a lot. Sometimes I'll put the airplane together, and sometimes it might make a misalignment, Same thing, even when it's in the paint stand, heat gun, twist, you know. I can do that with full fuselage. Airplane, spray it down over hit it with heat gun, straighten the level the stable with it. You know, I'd build a sledgehammer if I could, you know, it's big, dumb and dirty stuff. See what else, a couple other little tricks, making hinge slots, or opening up hinge slots to put the hinges in. I use a half a prop to sort of wiggle around and stretch it, and sometimes they'll go back in the end of the prop. Because it's like a little knife, you know, and it's wider than a knife blade, so it stretches it. Another trick that I use a lot is take the trim iron on high heat, stick it in the slot. It'll open it up permanently, so you can get epoxy in there. Put the epoxy in with a syringe, put the hinge in behind it. Don't try to put the epoxy on the hinge, because it'll end up in the hinge barrels. That's again true for anything, not just for profiles. What else am I missing? On the airplanes that I use with cable leadouts, I use the Sullivan brass plated cable, which I like a lot. It's just expensive. And I mentioned this before in one of these videos. I use the little copper crimps that Brodak sells, they call them thimble sets, to run the lead out, put it down the cable, loop it, run it back through, and crimp it with a pair of vice grips first. Then I'll tighten it in the bench vise just to make sure it's crimped down. And then run solder around the loop and through the crimp. And I never had one come loose. And the solder is in there to eliminate eyelets on this end. So that's one less thing to fool with. It makes it easier to get your line connectors on. And on the bell crank end, I don't bush the bell crank. I just let the cable loop through it with the solder again. Because now it's in effect the same as music wire. It's a solid piece. And the lead in the solder is partially a lubricant. Pull a couple of drops of motor oil, it's as slick as it can be. But the Sullivan cable, they've gotten outrageous with that stuff. And then, of course, Brodak here marks it up a little too. Everybody's got to make a little money on the transaction, but the more scarce stuff gets, naturally, the more expensive it gets.
You're looking for lead out cable, Lure America.
Is it the brass stuff? That's what I'm looking at, some of that solder.
Yeah, I bought 300-foot roll.
Okay, Lure America?
Yeah.
I guess it's like lureamerica.com or something
Right.
like that. All right. Good place to look, see.
Yeah, and they also have, those scissor clips that we use.
Yeah,
They have those too, because that's fishing equipment.
yeah, sure, that's where all of it came from.
What do they call it, Sparky?
Lure America.
No, what do they call the wire?
Leader.
Just leave it?
I got 80-pound leader. 30, I think it's about 50,000 or what, it's pretty good.
Yeah, the Sullivan is 30, right out of 30 seconds, 30,000, 31,000, something like
This is
that.
80-pound stuff, it's big.
Never had any of it break. The axles and this is the landing gear in this airplane, and what I put in all of my kits is the Brodak BH 1776, easy number to remember. Aluminum landing gear, because they work neat. I discovered them because the Brodak Cardinal kit had, the originals at least had wire gear, but the ARFs had these. So, we started having them as spare parts for the ARFs, and that's how I stumbled across them a number of years ago. The axles are 540 bolts. 540 bolts are almost exactly 1/8 of an inch. And if you're using wheels with a 5/32 hole, just push it, stick, with brass tubing. Actually, nice trick if you're flying on pavement, push it with aluminum tubing, because it doesn't make noise when it lands and rolls. That's a Bob White feature. Brass tubing, you hear rattle, but aluminum tubing, it won't make any noise. But use the 540 bolts, they come from micro fasteners also. And it's just simply the bolt through the wheel and nut on this side. I run it down with my fingers to the wheel to spin, stick it together, run the other nut down, put, an Allen wrench in this end to hold it. Usually what I tighten the other end with is your glow plug wrench, which the glow plug side of it fits the 540 nut, which is kind of convenient, just and tighten it down. You want to make make sure they're tight, because the one side it'll spin off of there, because whichever side it is. I've had wheels come off before, so that's not any fun. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover tonight with this, just talking about simple stuff to do. Be glad to answer any questions, or if you guys have other stuff to throw in the pot, you feel free to add anything you do that's workable too. Sparky, you're full of knowledge. You got something to add besides.
I don't know nothing. This is your show.
That's my show here. Any questions, comments, anything else? It doesn't have to be about profile airplanes.
How about you guys out in YouTube? You guys got any questions? Live chat.
We're waiting patiently. Caller, are you on the line?
Yeah, excellent picture from T-Bone, and hi all you guys from down under. So he's in.
Hey, good night, mates.
Yeah, where's that guy with the Foster's beer? He knows it.
They don't know what that is down there anymore.
Yeah. This is Tom Dixon's easy build profile tips. So if you got any questions,
Go ahead. I got one more thing I forgot to say, but go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, when I put fuselages and wings together, this is important, so I don't know how I forgot it. I make sure that the slot where the wing goes in is slightly oversized. I want it to be sloppy. Then I put little wedges of wood. It's like hanging a door. You know, you put little pieces of wood to get it centered and tacking it with CA to get it where I want. Then I turn the airplane inboard wing down. Take masking tape and mask all around the inboard side. Very sticky masking tape that you don't want to come loose. Turn the airplane up in a trash can, inboard wing down, and inject epoxy, slow cure epoxy all the way around. And then hit it with a heat gun. So you thin the epoxy so that it sinks into the wood, and the fuselage sinks into the wood in the wing, or gets into the weave of the cloth if it's a foam wing, and ties it all together. Let it cure 4 hours, take the tape off, and then you cover it up. Cover all that ugly stuff with the super
You
suit.
don't use an instance meter on the wing to set it up or anything.
Say again?
Like instance meters, you don't use any of that stuff.
We need, my eyeballs have been done this long enough. Because the problem with all of these things that we use to measure with is you're still measuring with 60 or 70-year-old eyes. So you can have everything all around and micrometer this and that. You're still kind of looking at it like this through the top and the bottom of your bifocals. And what I found, I'll put lines on the airplane to center the wing, center the airplane with ink marks and get the incidence right. And then for the platform, I usually put a triangle, if it's got a straight trailing edge, triangle against the fuselage on a profile, big triangle. So, lock it in place. It may tape it, make sure I got it and tack it real quick with CA so it doesn't move. If it's a straight leading edge, I'll do it on the leading edge before I put the cheek on the thing. And then what I find is that if I put the airplane way over there somewhere and back off and look at it, is a double check to make sure they're not like this. I'm not too worried about is the fuselage tilted slightly. It's not going to affect anything aerodynamically. I mean, like from frontal view, but planform view, I want the hinge line perpendicular to the fuselage.
Let me answer this guy's question real quick. He asked me, do I use pressure on tongue mufflers? I do. You don't have to.
I don't have it on this, and this
Right.
is a tongue muffler.
All right.
It's pressure. Pressure, the way we use it, I find it handy on a full fuselage airplane, so that when I crank it inverted, the fuel doesn't run out on the ground while I'm cranking it, because the tube goes up, and that's about the most useful part of the pressure line as far as I'm concerned. And I had a pressure line come off of the nets a couple of years ago.
Disaster.
The chipmunk, and it would go in, brrrr, that's all it did, it just leaned out very slightly. Still made the time limit. What was I saying before this?
You were talking about gluing the fuselage in.
Oh yeah, we just, once I get everything square, I back off and look at it, because my distance vision is way better than my close vision. And I can, no matter how many times I measure, I can see if it's out of line better than I can trying to measure up close with anything. And I think that's true for nearly all of us.
Now, I don't know how many of you guys have used this superfill stuff, but when I build mostly full body fuselages. I have even quit epoxying the fuselage on because I superfill inside and outside, and that superfill
It's
is
epoxy.
epoxy. It's strong as hell.
Yeah, it's light, it's a little bit brittle, but if you got enough of it to cover everything, it's gonna make it strong.
You're not gonna break it.
Fillets with it.
Well, of course I would fill it with it, yeah, that's what all of this stuff is.
Okay.
You know, blend everything together, try to make it look like it's a more expensive, fancier model than it actually is. I really color it, I make it fillets, but I really cover it up ugly.
Do you want to tell them about putting fillets on? I mean, I don't know how you do it, but I want to make sure that the fuselage is silk span first, and it's hardened up, and the wings covered, and then put the silk span. Otherwise, you'll dig a hole in the balsa.
Well, I'll be glad to do that real quick. First of all, remember my fuselage is a glass, and not silk span.
Okay.
And glass epoxy. But the same thing holds true with the wing already, doped and I use nitrate all the way through. In fact, I use very little butyrate clear anywhere. But I use masking tape, go around the fuselage, go around the wing or the stab, wherever you want it to be, with cheapest masking tape you can get. And then mix up the superfill. I just glob it on the airplane with my finger. And then I get it all over the airplane, spray it with a spray bottle, wet my finger and go just like that. I don't use any tool, I just wet it and go. And then go all the way around the airplane that way, take the tape off, wet it again and push the tape edge out. Just put pressure, it'll squeeze out, keep putting it on a paper towel as you go. Wet it again, feather it here and there as I want to. Let it set 24 hours, wet sand it with 220, put a couple of coats of dope on it, of nitrate, and then go paint the airplane.
Got a question from out in the world. A lot of profile models look so front heavy. How do you guys keep the CG in the right place? Tail weight?
This one's got an ounce of weight on the tail. I didn't have time to dig a hole in it and sink it. But most of the nose heavy airplanes are probably because you're using a heavy engine and a big muffler. If you use an LE-46 with a very popular engine, stupid muffler weighs what, 2.5 ounces? This, I forget which muffler I've got on this.
7 grams.
This is, I don't know whose muffler this is, come to think of it. Yeah, that's an RSM muffler, which is very light.
Quarter ounce.
Something like that. So use the least amount of weight. We got a plastic spinner on it. When I first put this airplane together, it had an LA-40 on it, and we could barely raise the nose of the metal spinner. Put an FP-40 on it, which helped a lot. Plastic spinner, still end up having to add an ounce of weight to the tail. Now, most airplanes are not like a stunt machine. They've got a bigger fuselage and more overhang back here or whatever. We have the opposite problem with the Ringmaster 576s because I originally made those kits with 16th ply doublers. And for those, I go to 1/8" ply because the nose is shot and it needs the extra weight in the front end.
Why does Tom use nitrate dope? Because everybody knows on my channel I'm dead set against nitrate.
I use nitrate because it will stick to any damn thing.
Yeah.
Metal, fiberglass, epoxy, whatever, and especially over the superfill or used to be epoxylite. It used only nitrate before then just shoot the color, because that way you don't get bubbles in the fillets. If you use butyrate, particularly if you use too much, when it dries and cures, it'll pop off the fillet.
Do you know why?
I assume it's gassing off and you don't have a good structure.
Here's the fillet, side of the fuselage like this.
Yeah.
Dope is shrinking, so you spray in there. So it's shrinking, it stands out.
Yeah, but nitrate itself, is almost zero shrink. And if you buy it from aircraft supply, it's called non-shrinking or non-tautening nitrate. You can also get non-tautening butyrate.
That's what I use.
Yeah. The stuff that Brodak sells, I think is Randolph's as an origin. And I think it's a non-tautening, but I don't know.
It is. I use nitrate.
Yeah.
Brodak nitrate.
I've got an aircraft supply or aircraft spruce place about 60 miles from me. I'll go down there and pick up a gallon of butyrate and a gallon of nitrate. Superfill, that kind of stuff.
The next question, does Tom have any ideas about the inside wing being longer?
It's probably not a good idea. what I find is airplanes trim out easiest with equal panel wings. I'm with Al Arabia on that. Because the extra tip weight it takes on an equal panel wing always helps you. Now, you say, I say extra, I don't mean so much to the hinges all the time. But even on takeoff, a non-equal panel wing with more tip weight, as it goes, accelerates that way, the wing will lag back and help keep the lines tight on takeoff. Start a wing over, that extra weight this way keeps the lines tight on a wing over. When you got the inboard wing longer, particularly in some of the early airplanes that had 2-inch longer inboard panel, the airplane would roll outboard and yaw inboard from the drag on the wing. Now this is built per Schaefer's original design with a 1-inch longer inboard panel in 1970 or 71. To get it to fly like I wanted it to, I don't know if the camera can see it. It's got a tab that's about 3/4 of an inch wide and maybe 3.5 inches long with clear plastic on the outboard wing. They add more flap area at the tip. They add more drag and more lift to that.
That's because because I do it too. Everybody that builds, which I use 3/4 of an inch asymmetry, this flap out here should be a 1/4 inch longer. Same root, but 1/4 inch bigger, all the way along.
That's just the same idea.
Yeah.
I was just using the original dimension.
But that's a Billy deal.
Yeah. If you're building from scratch, designing from scratch, you're not trying to replicate a classic airplane. Build a wings equal panel, it's always easier, always easier. And if you got, if you're building the foam wing, if you got one's heavier than the other, put the heavier one outboard. Use heavier wood on the outboard.
I do. Yeah. I only use a quarter ounce of tip weight. Because I'm a weight nut.
Any other questions from out in the world there?
Let's see.
I think one thing is joining the wings.
Joining the wings.
How many of you profile guys use steel lines?
I do. Steel, just out of habit.
Solids?
No, cable. I know Dennis had missing. I think he's flying with the Spectre stuff.
He's on Spectre.
Spider or whatever.
That's good stuff. Believe it or not, I was dead set against it. Just like spokes and just like belt drives on Harleys, I was dead set against it. And fuel injection and all that crap. But I used Spectre for the first time about 2 weeks ago. It's great shit.
You can get away with a lot less tip weight, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And under the new rules, you can fly with kite string if you want to, it'll pass the pull test. So, I've gone downsize. I'm still using steel lines because I know how to use them. 18 big airplanes and 15s to 12s airplanes.
Any tail incidents or engine offset?
Engine offset on the pilot, just like 1/440 washer under the front lugs. I don't believe in incidents in the tail. It doesn't make sense to me because you want the airplane to be symmetrical. What I find, this argument's gone around for years, but my reaction to where people say they need positive incidents in the tail, so it turns equal both ways. Those are the guys that are setting out with a handle tilted forward, and they got up is quicker than down, so they build in the airplane to compensate for not having the handle set right.
So Tom uses 2 degrees motor offset. I use 3, but it's up to you. You can use 0, but you'll be chasing, the airplane will be chasing you around.
Yeah, it's 440 washer under the front legs, whatever that is.
Right, it's 2 degrees.
That's how technical I really am.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't have a 440 washer, I'll use a 632. That's, it doesn't matter.
It's, there's the reason why we got Tom here explaining how he does things is because I do things different, but there's no one way to do stuff. And all ends up the same.
Yeah. What I think is important for all of us, particularly if you're coming up in this field, this hobby, this sport, is to be curious and try things. Don't be afraid to try things. Try different handles, try different control ratios. Try moving the CG back, but not too far, or forward, or, there's zillion variables because you always want to be zero in on what works for you. Now, I figured that out what works for me 30, 40 years ago. But if you're fairly new in this, or you've never played with all these variables, it's a heck of an education just to see the difference, just to learn the difference.
Get yourself some Gumby. It's green clay. It looks just like Gumby, and it goes on. And if you need more tip weight, just put a glob of clay on it. You want some tail weight, put a glob of clay and try it, and that way you can take it on and off and adjust.
It's not modeling clay. Brymex has it in the, I don't know what.
Some guys say a little slop in the flaps and elevators is a good thing.
No, I don't think so. Uh, Again, go back to Al Raby, who's one of the guys who's contributed a great deal to this hobby. Not a guy I want to go to dinner with, but he's contributed a great deal to the hobby with some of his ideas. He used to talk about he didn't want to slop in his airplanes because he flew in 2,000 flights. They're going to wear enough on their own without building it in. And if you think you need slop, you've got something misaligned someplace. And then I see guys who talk about, well, I need a little slop in my elevator. And you look at the handle, and it's like one of these plastic handles, and the lines are floating a quarter inch either way. So you know when you can't fly the airplane. I bush on the old Easy Just to these wood Draco handles. I bush the outlet holes so the lines, can't slop up and down.
I got a question for you. Do you tape hinges?
No,
Good.
never. I've done it in the past. I don't see the benefit if you build it right in the first place.
That's exactly right.
You look at full scale airplanes, some of the older airplanes, you see on some of them you see a gap like this between the stabilizer and the elevator, or the rudder and the fin. We're flying 55 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. Stick your hand out the car at 55, 60 miles an hour. Put your fingers together, pull them apart. How much difference does it really make?
What kind of hand do you use? I use a Casminato, but what do you use?
Well, it depends on the airplane. I always start with a old Easy Just Hot Rock or one of the Rayco copies of a Hot Rock, because that's what I learned to fly on 60-something years ago.
Let's see, I have one of your 46 SF engines. He has one of your motors for many years. It's heavier than other engines. What is a good airplane for that motor? He has one of your 46 SF engines. What is a good airplane for that?
Anything with a fairly short nose. 46 SF, that's the ball bearing OS.
Strong and smooth, but they are heavy.
Yeah. 630 square inch wing, 10-inch nose, 16.5, 17-inch tail motor.
And if you don't think that'll work, cut a half-inch off the nose, make it 9.5, and move the tank back into the wing.
Yeah, plastic spinner, wood prop.
Right.
Light muffler to make. I'm so locked into flying classic airplanes and replicating the way they were, and then trying to make them fly. If you're starting from scratch, nobody says you can't, bandsaw the nose off the airplane and try something else. There was some other question in there we were talking about that Mitt jumped over something.
What type of handle do you use?
The Easy Just Hot Rock are equivalent to start with. Some airplanes I will go to a CAS handle. I've got 3 or 4 CAS handles, and they work. But I sort of go back to the Hot Rock as a standard because that's one variable I can eliminate. This airplane I fly with a CAS handle because even after getting the CG back, I still want the controls to come in a little quicker, with a little wider spacing than the Hot Rock does. It's not that the plane's nose heavy, it just seems that it works better with just slightly more line spacing at the handle.
The reason I like the CAS handle is I can adjust the overhang. The farther out you go, the slower.
The deader it gets.
Yeah, the deader it gets around neutral, and the more you pull it back, the more it's like power steering.
Yeah. They're expensive. They work. I've had them for years. Never worn one out. I've worn out the balsa on each side of it, replaced it, but not the handle itself. They're good stuff. It's worth spending the money. If you never got one, it's worth getting one or two if you're serious about this.
Right.
It's not necessary, but it's a nice thing to have. Any other questions, thoughts from here or out there or wherever? If not, then we can wrap it up, Sparky, if you want to.
It's up to you.
Subscribe, like, whatever those things are that you say.
What paint finish on your models do you prefer? Hey, didn't you pay attention?
You must have come in late.
Yeah.
But a dope base, nitrate dope base, I use a sandable primer from Harbor Freight, that's what they call it, sandable primer. They make some other primer that I haven't used, but it's what they call the sandable, it's got a Camaro in the can. And, wet sand that down, shoot a couple coats of clear to lock it down, color, and then as I said earlier, the Southern polyurethane, clear, either 2 or 3 coats if I'm gonna cut and buff to finish, and 1 thin coat like this plane has on it out of the gun.
Got to remember, Tom is building utility airplanes.
Yes, sir. Fast, cheap.
They're not front row.
No. I'm a big bang for your buck and your time guy, because none of us are gonna live forever, and I like doing this a lot. I don't like doing one that takes 2 years, build one, sell it, fly it, crash it, go on to the next thing, keep busy at it instead of locking up a lot of time in one airplane.
That sandable primer you mentioned, is that rattle can?
Yeah, rattle can.
It's just like the DC 540.
Yeah.
It has
It's exactly
xylene
the
in
same
it.
stuff, exactly the same stuff, and it
Well,
works great.
the crest is like DC 540 too, but it's expensive.
I think the Harbor Freight stuff in round me is like $650, $690 a can, maybe cheaper than that.
This
I
stuff
can't
is
remember.
$15 a can. This crest, the guy here, I can't remember his name. He's an auto body guy.
Yeah, but the Harbor Freight stuff does. the job.
Utility.
It's compatible with everything.
He says
A plane that size, 2 cans?
one.
Pretty much 1 or 1.5.
Yeah.
And like I said, I ladle it on there.
Yeah.
So I don't have to do it but once.
So you put the primer on, you sand it, and then you put on, I understand you put on clear to seal that down?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I want, if there's any dust I've left anywhere, I don't want to spray the color and then have it separate. If I go to tape it or something, I don't want to pull the color out. Nitrate, once again, will stick to everything and everything will stick to it.
Hey, you guys out there sleeping? We got 22 watchers and only 11 likes. So hit the thumbs up button. Somebody's falling down. Because it used to be you had to impress people. Now you have to impress the algorithm. So hit the
If you
thumbs
don't
up.
like it, turn it off.
Right. Right.
That's what they put those knobs on the TV for, or the buttons on the remote. All right, if there's something,
You mentioned 540 was an 1/8 inch diameter. I don't know if anybody knew this, you might know it, but there's a very simple mathematical formula for those numbered machine screws, like 256, 348, 440s. You take that first number, multiply by 13, add 60. That's it. That gives you the diameter.
I think I'd just rather remember it.
What did you just say?
Take your first number in those machine screws, multiply by 13 and add 60, and that's your diameter in thousands.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't have the handy dandy little
Oh,
conversion
in
chart.
thousands, I deal in
Yeah.
quarter inches.
Here's how I do it. Yeah, that's about an 1/8.
But thank you all for tuning in out there in internet land, and I hope some of this helps you. And any questions, call me at the house, 9 to 6 most days. Write, I don't do email. My wife, I don't want to inundate my wife with that, because I never learned to type. And I never learned to play the banjo either. It's too damn late for both.
And no, he's not giving his number out over the internet. So you'll have to look him up on Stunt.
It's out there. The people can find it.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you tomorrow for, I guess, classic. No, is that right? Yeah, classic.
Nostalgia, whatever.
Fair winds, tight lines. We'll see you.
You got airplane kits yourself? Yeah, sure.